in the heart of a vast tropical rainforest, where the trees stretch tall to touch the sky and the dense foliage rustles with the movement of countless creatures. There lived a gorilla named Kobo. The forest was a vibrant, pulsating ecosystem, alive with the sounds of chirping birds, rustling leaves, and the occasional roar of distant beasts. The atmosphere was thick with humidity, the air scented with the earthy aroma of damp soil, and the bright rays of the sun pierced through the canopy, casting dappled shadows across the rich undergrowth. The rainforest was a world unto itself, a place where every creature, from the smallest ant to the largest predators, played a part in the delicate balance of nature. It was in this environment that Kobo found his home. Unlike the other gorillas in the jungle, who often kept to their own kind, Kobo had a unique nature that set him apart. He was a gentle giant, a protector, and a friend to all the animals, large and small. With his massive frame, broad shoulders, and powerful limbs, Kobo could have easily ruled the forest with fear. But he chose instead to live in harmony with it. His fur was a deep, rich black, with streaks of gray running through it, a testament to his age and wisdom. His eyes, a warm brown, gleamed with kindness and intelligence. Kobo's days were simple but full of meaning. He woke up with the first rays of the sun, stretching his long limbs and yawning before setting off on his morning patrol of the jungle. His steps were heavy, yet silent, as he moved through the dense underbrush, his large hands brushing past ferns and vines. His keen senses allowed him to detect any signs of trouble in the forest, whether it be the distant growl of a predator or the quiet cry of an animal in need. One of Kobo's most cherished routines was helping the animals of the forest. It wasn't that he was asked to. In fact, the creatures rarely spoke to him directly. But Kobo's heart was attuned to the needs of others, and he would often find himself helping those in distress without hesitation. It could be something as simple as lifting a fallen branch off a smaller animal, or as complex as guiding a lost bird back to its nest high in the trees. No task was too small or too great for Kobo. His strength and size made him the perfect ally in a world where survival could be harsh. One morning, as the sun climbed higher in the sky, Kobo was walking through the forest when he heard a faint sound, a soft whimper, barely audible above the usual forest noises. His ears perked up, and he followed the sound, moving swiftly through the trees. As he approached a clearing, he spotted a young deer caught in a tangle of vines, its delicate limbs struggling to break free. The vines had wrapped tightly around its legs, and it was clear that the animal was in pain. Without a second thought, Kobo knelt down beside the deer, his large hands gently pulling the vines apart. The deer, though frightened, sensed the kindness in Kobo's touch and remained still. Within moments, the vines were severed, and the deer was free. It stood up, its legs wobbly from the ordeal, but soon found its balance. The young deer looked up at Kobo with wide eyes, and for a brief moment, their gazes met. There was a silent understanding between them, a connection that transcended words. The deer nuzzled Kobo's hand before darting off into the safety of the trees. Kobo smiled softly to himself. It wasn't the first time he had helped an animal in need. And he knew it wouldn't be the last. He had long ago made peace with the fact that his life's purpose was to be a caretaker. A guardian of the jungle. The forest was his family. And every creature within it was his responsibility, no matter how big or small. As he continued his walk, Kobo came across a family of monkeys who were in the midst of a playful dispute. Two young monkeys were fighting over a bunch of bananas, tugging at the fruit and chattering angrily. Kobo watched for a moment, his brow furrowing as he assessed the situation. He knew that the monkeys' squabble could quickly escalate into something more dangerous if not handled properly. With a deep, calming breath, he let out a low grunt, a sound that immediately silenced the monkeys. They turned to him, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and respect. Kobo, ever patient, moved closer and gently placed the bananas out of their reach. He then gestured with his large hand for the monkeys to sit down. The two young monkeys hesitated. Then, sensing Kobo's calm demeanor, obeyed. Kobo gave them a stern but kind look and then reached into the nearby bushes. Pulling out a handful of fresh berries, he placed the berries on the ground between the monkeys, who eagerly took them, forgetting their earlier argument in the face of the delicious food. Kobo watched with satisfaction as the monkeys shared the berries, their previous squabble forgotten. He knew that sometimes, a gentle intervention was all that was needed to restore peace. The monkeys, now content and at ease, scampered off to continue their play, leaving Kobo to continue his journey. As the day wore on, Kobo continued to help those in need, always quietly and without expectation of reward. It was during one of his patrols that he came across a wounded jaguar, its sleek black coat marred by a deep gash along its side. The jaguar, though fierce and powerful, had clearly been caught off guard by a predator or a trap. It lay there, panting, its eyes flashing with pain and fear. Kobo could see that the jaguar was not a threat. It was simply a creature in need of help. Kobo approached cautiously, aware of the jaguar's pride and natural instinct to defend itself. He spoke softly, his voice low and soothing. As he knelt beside the injured animal, the jaguar growled weakly, but Kobo remained patient, allowing the animal time to adjust to his presence. Gently, Kobo reached out with one hand, carefully applying pressure to the wound to stem the bleeding. Using his knowledge of the forest's healing plants, he gathered some leaves and bark to create a poultice, which he placed over the jaguar's injury. The jaguar's breathing slowed as the pain began to subside, and it relaxed under Kobo's care. After a while, the jaguar rose to its feet, its muscles still stiff but its energy renewed. It looked at Kobo with a mixture of gratitude and respect before silently slipping away into the forest. Kobo smiled to himself again. His work here was done, and the jungle had once again returned to balance. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the jungle, Kobo made his way back to his home, a small clearing nestled between two great trees. He sat down by the edge of a sparkling stream, watching as the water flowed gently over the smooth stones. The sounds of the forest seemed to lull him into a peaceful trance. And for a moment, he allowed himself to simply be. He was at peace with his place in the world, knowing that his strength was not meant to conquer, but to protect. And so, Kobo continued his life in the heart of the rainforest, not as a ruler or a conqueror, but as a humble guardian of all that lived there. His acts of kindness were not done for recognition, but because he understood the importance of every life in the jungle. He had no need for praise or reward. The joy of helping others was enough. In the end, Kobo knew that he was not alone in the forest. He was part of something much larger than himself, a network of life. Interconnected and interdependent, where every act of kindness created ripples that spread throughout the entire ecosystem. And so, in his own quiet way, Kobo ensured that the rainforest remained a place of peace, a sanctuary where life, in all its forms, could thrive. In the vast, vibrant rainforest, Kobo's life was marked by a deep bond with the other animals. His heart, as strong as his physical form, beat in tune with the rhythms of the jungle, and his kindness spread like ripples across the still waters of a pond. Among all the creatures of the forest, one friendship stood out, a special connection that touched Kobo's heart in a way nothing else could. It was with Tito, a young elephant calf, who had found in Kobo not just a protector, but a mentor, a guide, and a friend. Tito was a joyful, playful little elephant, still learning about the world and the delicate balance of life within it. His skin was a soft gray, marked by the innocence of youth, and his huge, floppy ears were always twitching with curiosity. Tito's playful nature was unmatched, and he spent most of his days running through the tall grass, blowing trumpet-like calls that echoed through the trees. His joyful presence brought a sense of lightness to the dense, sometimes heavy atmosphere of the jungle. From the moment Tito was born, he had felt an inexplicable draw to Kobo, the mighty gorilla who had a reputation for his strength and wisdom. Unlike the other animals, who often kept their distance from the powerful creatures of the jungle, Tito was fascinated by Kobo. Every day, without fail, he would seek out the great gorilla, drawn to him not by fear or admiration, but by a genuine desire for friendship. At first, Kobo had been unsure of how to interact with the young elephant. He was used to keeping his distance from others, preferring his solitude, but Tito's warmth and enthusiasm were impossible to ignore. It wasn't long before Tito and Kobo had formed an unspoken bond. Tito would follow Kobo around the forest, observing him as he went about his daily tasks of helping animals and protecting the jungle. The young elephant was especially intrigued by Kobo's calm demeanor and his ability to remain gentle despite his great size and strength. He would watch in awe as Kobo would lift fallen trees, carry animals to safety, or calm a frightened creature with just a touch. Tito, in turn, began to imitate Kobo's actions, trying to be as strong yet gentle, as patient and wise. Kobo, though initially reserved, found a sense of purpose in his relationship with Tito. He saw in the young elephant not just a playful companion, but a chance to pass on his knowledge and his philosophy of life. Every day, as they wandered through the jungle together, Kobo taught Tito valuable lessons about strength, not just physical strength, but the strength of the heart and the mind. He would often tell Tito, "True strength is not about how much you can lift or how loud you can roar. It's about knowing when to protect the weak, when to be gentle, and when to show compassion." Tito, though still a young calf, was quick to understand the meaning behind Kobo's words. He had witnessed Kobo's countless acts of kindness, from rescuing animals trapped in vines to protecting smaller creatures from predators. And with every lesson, Tito's understanding of strength deepened. He no longer saw strength as a tool for domination, but as a gift to be used for the greater good of the jungle. But it was one fateful day, when a storm had swept through the jungle, that their bond would truly be tested. The wind howled, the trees swayed, and the rain fell in torrents, creating a chaotic scene in the once peaceful jungle. As the storm raged on, Tito found himself separated from his mother. The powerful gusts had knocked over trees and scattered the forest animals. And in the confusion, Tito had lost sight of his mother. The young elephant wandered through the storm, calling out for her, his cries lost in the roar of the wind. Frantic and disoriented, Tito stumbled through the thick underbrush, his large ears flapping helplessly. His heart raced with fear, his mind clouded with worry. He was just a young calf. And in the storm, everything seemed bigger, scarier, and more dangerous. Tito's steps became slower, his calls more desperate. He knew the jungle was vast, and he was too small to navigate its dangers alone. The weight of his isolation pressed down on him, and the young elephant's spirit began to break. It was at that moment that Kobo appeared. His massive frame was a comforting silhouette against the storm, his eyes scanning the chaos for any sign of danger. When he heard Tito's cries, his heart leaped into action. Kobo was no stranger to fear, but he had learned long ago that fear could be overcome with compassion and courage. Without hesitation, he moved toward the young elephant, his long strides cutting through the rain with purpose. Tito, hearing the familiar rustle of leaves, turned around and saw the towering figure of Kobo emerging from the mist of the storm. His heart swelled with both relief and embarrassment. He had always been the one to follow Kobo, but now, in his moment of fear, it was Kobo who had come to find him. "Tito," Kobo called softly, his deep voice calm and reassuring. "You're not alone. I'm here." The young elephant let out a relieved cry and rushed toward Kobo. Collapsing into his arms, his large body shook with sobs, the fear and worry of being lost too much for him to bear. Kobo wrapped his strong arms around the calf, pulling him close. The warmth of the gorilla's embrace was a comfort to Tito, grounding him in a moment of chaos. The storm still raged around them, but in that moment, the world seemed still. Kobo gently stroked Tito's back with his large, calloused hands, murmuring soft words of comfort. "You are strong, Tito," he said. "You may be young, but you have the heart of a warrior. And you have a family here. In the jungle, we will always take care of you." Tito sniffled, his body trembling with relief. "I was so scared, Kobo. I couldn't find my mom." "I know," Kobo replied, his voice steady. "It's scary to be alone. But remember, strength isn't just about size or power. It's about knowing that when you feel lost, there is always someone who will help you find your way." As the storm began to subside, the wind easing its grip on the jungle, Kobo stood up, cradling Tito in his arms like a child. With the rain still falling gently, they began their search for Tito's mother, Kobo's steady presence offering comfort to the young elephant. It wasn't long before they found her. The mother elephant had been frantically searching for Tito as well. And when she saw her calf in Kobo's arms, her eyes filled with tears of relief. She rushed over, nuzzling Tito affectionately, her trunk wrapping around him in a protective embrace. Tito, now safe and sound, nuzzled his mother back, his earlier fear vanishing in the warmth of her presence. As Tito and his mother shared their reunion, Kobo stepped back, watching the emotional scene with a quiet smile. He was happy that Tito was safe, and even happier to see that the bond between them had deepened. It wasn't just the lessons of strength that had passed between them, but also the understanding that the greatest strength lay in the ability to care for and protect others, especially in times of need. Tito, now back with his mother, turned to Kobo and gave him a grateful look. "Thank you, Kobo," he said softly. "You are my strength." Kobo nodded, his heart swelling with pride. "And you, Tito, are my joy." And with that, the rain stopped, the sky cleared, and the jungle seemed to breathe again. In the heart of the rainforest, Kobo and Tito's bond was unbreakable, a testament to the power of kindness, strength, and the deep connections that unite all living beings. The rain came down in torrents, the jungle alive with the sounds of the storm. The wind howled, the trees swayed, and the once soft, mossy ground turned slick and treacherous. It wasn't long before the steady downpour transformed the landscape, turning the forest floor into a maze of rushing streams and puddles. The normally tranquil jungle seemed charged with an energy that came from the force of nature itself. But as much as the rain nourished the jungle, it also had the power to create chaos. Tito, the young elephant, was full of energy as always. His curiosity knew no bounds. And today, the storm only seemed to heighten his sense of adventure. As the rain pelted down, he tromped through the jungle, the water splashing around his massive feet. The wind made the trees sway and groan, and Tito reveled in the wildness of it all. He loved the way the rain felt on his skin, the coolness against his warm body, and the sense of freedom it gave him. But Tito's playful exploration led him into a part of the forest he had never ventured into before. It was a section of the jungle that had been untouched by the storm's wrath, where the ground was still firm beneath his feet, and the trees created a natural canopy that shielded him from the worst of the downpour. However, he didn't notice the danger ahead. A deep, jagged hole had opened in the earth, the result of the rainwater eroding the soil beneath it. The hole, which had appeared suddenly, was wide and deep, stretching far down into the earth. It was just large enough for Tito's massive frame to fall into. And the young elephant, with his usual sense of curiosity, didn't notice it until it was too late. He was too distracted by the sound of the rain and the wind to see the danger lurking beneath his feet. In a split second, the ground beneath Tito gave way. His large, sturdy legs slipped, and he tumbled head first into the hole. His massive body hit the sides of the pit, and he slid down the steep, slippery walls, his ears flapping desperately to try to regain his balance. But it was no use. The hole was too deep, the walls too smooth, and Tito was too large to climb out. With a loud, desperate trumpet, Tito tried to reach for the edges of the hole, but there was nothing to grab onto. The sides were slick and steep, and with each passing moment, the water from the rainstorm filled the hole, making it even harder for Tito to stay on his feet. He splashed around in the muddy water, his heart racing with fear. The hole was becoming a pit of water, and as the storm continued, the water level was rising. "Help! Help!" Tito cried, his voice filled with panic. His eyes were wide with fear as he struggled in the rising water, his body growing tired from the constant effort to keep his head above the surface. The young elephant's usual bravado was gone, replaced by a raw, childlike terror. Tito had always known the jungle to be a place of wonder and joy. But now it seemed like a vast, unforgiving world that could easily swallow him whole. Outside the hole, Tito's mother, along with the other elephants of the herd, stood helplessly, their trunks reaching out in vain. They had heard Tito's cries and had rushed to the scene. But when they arrived, they were confronted by the sheer impossibility of the situation. The hole was too narrow for them to enter. The elephants were massive, their large, thick bodies unable to fit into the small, jagged pit. They could only stand at the edge, their trunks extended in a desperate attempt to reach their child. But the gap was too wide. The water continued to rise, and Tito's mother, in particular, seemed to be paralyzed with fear. "Tito, Tito," she called, her voice filled with panic and sorrow. Her trunk waved helplessly in the air, but there was nothing she could do. The other elephants trumpeted loudly, their calls ringing through the jungle. But the storm made it impossible for anyone to hear them. The rain lashed down harder, and the water continued to fill the hole. Tito was running out of time. Kobo, who had been nearby, heard the frantic calls of the elephants. The storm had kept him in his shelter, but the cries of the young elephant reached his ears, and his heart immediately raced. He had been in the forest long enough to know when something was wrong. And the desperation in Tito's voice sent a wave of urgency through him. Without a moment's hesitation, the mighty gorilla sprang into action. His large, powerful limbs pushed through the rain-soaked jungle with purpose. Kobo's eyes were fixed on the path ahead, his mind already calculating the best way to help. He knew he had to get to Tito quickly. Time was running out. When Kobo arrived at the edge of the hole, he saw the full extent of the danger. The young elephant was struggling, his body half submerged in the rising water, his movements frantic and panicked. Tito's mother was standing helplessly at the edge of the pit, her trunk reaching down in a futile attempt to touch her son. The other elephants were pacing anxiously around the perimeter, unsure of how to help. But Kobo knew there was only one thing he could do. With a roar of determination, Kobo dropped to his knees at the edge of the hole, his eyes never leaving Tito's terrified face. The rain continued to fall in sheets, drenching him as he peered into the pit. The water was rising fast, and it was clear that if something wasn't done soon, Tito wouldn't be able to keep his head above the surface for much longer. "Hold on, Tito," Kobo shouted, his deep voice cutting through the storm. "I'm coming for you." Kobo's massive arms reached down into the hole, his muscles straining with the effort. His hands, though large and powerful, were surprisingly gentle as they extended toward Tito. The young elephant's eyes widened with hope when he saw Kobo's strong, reassuring presence. With a desperate effort, Tito reached up with his trunk, trying to latch onto Kobo's hand. But the distance was too great, and the slippery sides of the hole made it almost impossible for them to connect. Kobo quickly realized that he wouldn't be able to reach Tito from above. He needed a new plan. "Stay strong, Tito," he called again, his voice full of calm determination. "I'm going to get you out." Without wasting another second, Kobo moved quickly around the edge of the hole. He was searching for anything that could be used to help pull Tito out. His sharp eyes scanned the ground, and he spotted a long vine hanging from one of the nearby trees. It was thick and sturdy, perfect for the task at hand. Kobo wasted no time in climbing the tree, his powerful arms wrapping around the trunk as he ascended with ease. At the top, he grabbed the vine and tested its strength, pulling on it to ensure it wouldn't snap under the weight. Satisfied, he descended quickly, the rainwater streaming down his face, and knelt at the edge of the hole once more. "Tito," he called out, "I'm going to toss you the vine. When you catch it, I need you to hold on tight." Tito, still struggling to keep his head above water, nodded his large head with a frightened but determined expression. He could see the vine, and he knew it was his only chance. With all his might, Kobo threw the vine into the hole, the long rope of plant material spiraling down toward Tito. The young elephant reached out, his trunk extending, and with a surprising amount of skill for his size, he caught the vine. It was just the break he needed. Slowly but surely, Tito began to pull himself up, the water now up to his neck. Kobo tugged on the vine, helping to pull the young elephant closer to the edge. With one final, powerful heave, Kobo managed to pull Tito out of the hole and onto solid ground. The young elephant collapsed on the wet earth, exhausted but safe, his body shivering from the cold and fear. His mother rushed to his side, her trunk wrapping around him as she pulled him into a tight, protective embrace. Tito looked up at Kobo, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Kobo," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I thought I was going to drown." Kobo smiled softly, his heart swelling with relief. "You're safe now, Tito, and I will always be here for you." Tito's mother gave Kobo a thankful nod, her eyes brimming with tears. "Thank you, Kobo," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You saved my son." Kobo nodded, his gaze softening. It's what we do for family. No one is ever alone in this jungle." As the rain began to ease, the storm losing its grip on the jungle, the forest seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. Tito was safe, and the bond between him, his mother, and Kobo had only grown stronger. The jungle had tested them, but together, they had overcome the danger, proving that even in the darkest moments, there was always hope. The storm raged on, its fury making the jungle seem like an entirely different world. The normally calm and serene atmosphere of the forest had transformed into a place of chaos, where the howling wind tore through the trees and the rain lashed the ground relentlessly. Nature, in all its power, showed no mercy. Yet, amidst the torrent, there was a cry, a sound of desperation, that echoed through the jungle and pierced through the thick curtain of rain. It was Tito, the young elephant, overwhelmed by fear and panic, was trapped in the deep, treacherous hole that had suddenly opened up in the earth. Water from the relentless downpour was rising fast, and each second Tito spent struggling to keep his head above the growing flood only made the situation worse. His massive body, though strong, was no match for the rising water and the slippery walls of the pit. The hole had become his prison, and his desperate cries for help were drowned out by the crashing storm. Kobo, who had been resting in the shelter of a nearby grove, was the first to hear the distress. His sharp instincts told him that something was wrong. The call was unmistakable. It was Tito. Without even a moment's hesitation, Kobo's heart pounded in his chest as he surged into action. His massive form darted through the rain-soaked forest, his powerful legs pushing him through the underbrush with speed and precision. The storm made everything harder, but Kobo's determination only grew. As he approached the edge of the pit, Kobo's keen eyes spotted Tito, struggling against the current that was rising rapidly in the hole. The water had already reached the young elephant's shoulders, and he was visibly exhausted. His frantic movements were becoming slower and weaker. His face twisted in panic. His mother and the rest of the elephant herd stood helplessly on the edge, unable to reach their beloved calf. They could only watch, powerless, as the floodwater continued to rise. Kobo's heart raced as he assessed the situation. The hole was too narrow for the elephants to enter, and the water was rising fast. The roar of the storm drowned out every other sound. But in that moment, Kobo's mind was laser-focused on one thing: saving Tito. Without a second thought, Kobo dropped to his knees at the edge of the hole. The ground around him was slick with rainwater. But he didn't care. He could see Tito's terror, his desperate eyes pleading for help. And that was all that mattered. The rain battered down on his thick fur. But Kobo was undeterred. With one powerful movement, he thrust his arms into the water, reaching down into the pit with all the strength he could muster. The water was cold and strong, tugging at his limbs. But Kobo's determination was even stronger. His fingers brushed against the slick sides of the hole as he tried to find a solid grip. But the mud and rain made everything slippery. Every second felt like an eternity. Tito was slipping farther away from his reach, his young body struggling against the current as the floodwater pushed him deeper into the pit. Kobo didn't falter. His heart was racing, but his mind was clear. There was no room for hesitation. With a fierce grunt, Kobo planted his feet firmly on the muddy ground and reached down again, his enormous hands now gripping Tito's sturdy frame. The young elephant let out a cry of relief as he felt the gorilla's hands wrap around him. But the danger was far from over. The water continued to rise, and every moment was critical. Kobo's muscles strained with the effort as he pulled. The weight of Tito's body combined with the force of the rising water made every movement a battle. But Kobo was relentless. His massive arms trembled with the strain. But he didn't stop. Tito's life was in his hands. And he would not fail. With a powerful tug, Kobo managed to lift Tito's front legs higher. But the young elephant was still too heavy and the hole's walls too steep. The current of the water was relentless, pulling Tito down further into the pit. Kobo felt the panic rising in his own chest. But he forced it down. He couldn't afford to lose focus now. "Hold on, Tito," Kobo shouted over the roar of the storm. His voice was low but firm, a reminder to both himself and Tito that he wasn't going to give up. "I'm not leaving you. You're going to be all right." Tito's eyes, wide with fear, locked onto Kobo's, and the sight of that trust gave the gorilla the final push he needed. With a great, final effort, Kobo dug his feet into the mud, gritted his teeth, and with all the strength he could summon, yanked Tito upwards. The water surged around them, pulling back with an intensity that almost seemed determined to drag him down. But Kobo held on, refusing to let go. Every muscle in Kobo's arms screamed in protest as he pulled. But then, finally, he felt Tito's feet break the surface. With a final surge of strength, Kobo yanked the young elephant out of the water and onto the wet, slippery ground. They collapsed together, breathless and exhausted, as the storm raged around them. Tito lay on his side, gasping for air, his body shaking from the ordeal. But he was safe. Kobo, panting heavily, looked down at the young elephant. His heart pounded in his chest, and his body trembled from the intense exertion. But he didn't let go of Tito. He could see the fear and exhaustion in the young elephant's eyes. But he also saw something else, something that made his heart swell with pride. Tito was alive. He was safe. The herd of elephants, who had been standing helplessly at the edge of the hole, rushed forward. Tito's mother reached him first, her trunk trembling as she gently nuzzled her son. Her eyes filled with tears of relief. The other elephants trumpeted in joy, their trunks raised high in the air as they celebrated the safe return of their young calf. But as the herd gathered around him, Tito turned to look at Kobo. His wide eyes were filled with gratitude, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you, Kobo," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I thought I was going to drown." Kobo, still panting and drenched from the rain, smiled softly. "You're safe now, Tito, and I'll always be here for you. You're never alone." Tito nuzzled him gently, his body still trembling from the cold and fear. But the warmth of Kobo's presence and the relief of being rescued made him feel safe again. He had no words to express the gratitude in his heart. But his eyes said it all. Kobo looked out over the jungle. The storm slowly starting to subside. The water level in the pit was beginning to lower. And the rain was no longer falling as heavily. The jungle, once wild and chaotic, was slowly returning to a sense of calm. But for Kobo, the moment of rescue, the moment he had risked everything to save his friend, was a reminder of what it meant to be a protector. To be someone who would always stand by their friends, no matter the odds. As the last of the storm clouds cleared, and the warm glow of the sun began to pierce through the canopy of the jungle, Kobo stood tall, his heart still pounding with the aftermath of the rescue. Tito was safe, and that was all that mattered. No storm, no flood, no danger in the world could ever stop him from protecting the ones he loved. Because Kobo knew one thing for certain, when it came to friends, there was no limit to the strength he would give. The storm finally began to ease, the rain softening to a gentle drizzle, as the wind, no longer howling, whispered through the trees. The jungle, battered and soaked, seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. But amidst the quieting chaos, one small corner of the forest stood still with a profound, unspoken gratitude. Kobo, still panting from his exertion, remained kneeling at the edge of the pit, his powerful arms still holding Tito protectively. The young elephant, soaked to the bone, lay on the wet ground, his trembling body recovering from the ordeal. Tito's eyes, wide with relief and gratitude, were fixed on Kobo. His chest heaved with each breath. The storm's terror still fresh in his mind. But now there was a calmness, an overwhelming sense of safety. He was alive. He was free from the clutches of the rising waters. And it was thanks to the gorilla who had risked everything to save him. Kobo slowly, carefully, helped Tito to his feet, his hands steady and firm. The bond between them had been forged in that moment of shared danger. And now, in the quiet aftermath, it felt unbreakable. Tito's eyes shone with silent thanks, his lips trembling with emotion. But no words escaped his mouth. His heart was too full. Before Tito could say anything, a figure appeared from the edge of the pit. It was Tito's mother, her massive frame, drenched from the storm, moved with urgency and relief as she rushed to her son's side. Her eyes, once filled with panic, now softened with gratitude and overwhelming love. Without hesitation, she lowered her trunk to Tito, wrapping it around his small body, lifting him close. Tito, still too shaken to speak, simply rested his head against his mother's side. He felt the warmth of her body, the steady rhythm of her heartbeat, and he knew, in that moment, that he was safe. The storm had passed, and he was alive because of Kobo. His thoughts raced, but the only thing he could do was smile, his face lighting up with a joy so pure that it was impossible to hide. It was the kind of smile that spoke volumes, a smile that carried more love and gratitude than words could ever convey. The other elephants, who had been standing helplessly at the edge of the hole, now moved forward. They, too, had witnessed the incredible act of courage and sacrifice from Kobo. They knew that he had saved Tito's life, not because he had to, but because he had chosen to. They stood together in a circle, their great trunks raised high, their massive bodies forming a protective ring around the gorilla who had risked it all for one of their own. Tito's mother, still cradling him gently in her arms, stepped forward and gave Kobo a deep, respectful bow, her eyes shining with gratitude. She looked at him, the weight of her thankfulness impossible to hide. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. "You saved my son. There are no words to express what that means to me." Kobo, though humble in his ways, simply nodded. His eyes were soft, full of understanding. He was no hero, he thought. Not really. He was just someone who had done what was right, what was needed. But in the eyes of the elephants, and in the hearts of the creatures who knew him, he was something more. He was a protector, a friend, a guardian of all that lived in the jungle. The herd of elephants gathered closer, and one by one, they raised their trunks in unison, trumpeting loudly, a chorus of thanks and admiration. The sound resonated through the trees, echoing across the jungle. It was not a sound of fear or distress, but a sound of deep respect. It was their way of honoring Kobo, the mighty gorilla who had shown him that true strength was not in power, but in love, in sacrifice, and in the courage to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Tito, still nestled in his mother's arms, looked up at the gorilla who had saved him. His heart, still racing from the fear of the storm, was now calm, soothed by the steady presence of Kobo. As the elephants continued their chorus of gratitude, Tito turned his head slowly and met Kobo's gaze. There was a look in his eyes, one of profound understanding. In that look, Tito knew that their friendship had been sealed forever, not just by the storm, but by something deeper. It was a bond formed through sacrifice, a bond that would transcend anything that came their way in the future. Tito's mother, sensing the unspoken connection between the two, smiled gently and nudged her son. "Go on, Tito. Thank Kobo properly," she encouraged softly, her voice full of warmth and pride. Tito, with a newfound sense of courage, climbed down from his mother's arms and stepped toward Kobo. He hesitated for a moment, his large ears flicking nervously. But then he took a deep breath and, with all the strength he could muster, approached the gorilla, his eyes locked with Kobo's, and for the first time, words flowed easily from his lips. "Thank you," Tito said, his voice small but filled with sincerity. I don't know what I would have done without you. You saved my life. You saved us all." Kobo, for a moment, said nothing. He simply smiled, his heart swelling with warmth at Tito's words. But then, in his deep, calm voice, he spoke. "You don't have to thank me, Tito. You're a part of this forest. You're family, and family looks after each other." Tito's eyes shimmered with emotion as he nodded, his young face filled with understanding. The young elephant knew that what Kobo had said was true. True strength was not about being the biggest or the strongest. It was about standing by each other, about helping when it mattered most. It was about being there, without hesitation, no matter the cost. The rain had finally stopped. the clouds parting to reveal the clear blue sky above. The jungle, still dripping with the remnants of the storm, seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. The ground, once muddy and treacherous, was now soft and cool underfoot. A fresh breeze blew through the trees, bringing with it the scent of renewal, of life reborn after the storm. And in the midst of it all, Kobo stood tall, surrounded by the elephants who had come to admire him, not for his size or strength, but for his heart. Tito, standing beside his mother, looked up at Kobo once more, his eyes filled with a sense of reverence. He would never forget the sacrifice, the courage, and the love that had been shown to him. In that moment, Tito understood something that would stay with him forever: that true strength wasn't found in the size of one's muscles, but in the strength of one's heart. The scene was peaceful now. The animals of the jungle once again finding their place under the sun. Tito, standing next to his mother, felt a warmth inside him that had nothing to do with the sun's rays. It was a warmth that came from knowing that he had a protector, a friend, in Kobo, and that, more than anything, was the greatest gift he could ever ask for. As the elephants circled Kobo one last time, their trunks reaching out to gently touch him in a silent show of respect, the message was clear: strength, in its purest form, was not for domination, but for protection, for love, for friendship. True strength, as Kobo had shown them all, was about protecting and caring for others, about standing strong not just when it's easy, but especially when it's hard. And in that strength, they all found a bond that would never be broken. The final words of the day, whispered by the wind through the trees, seemed to echo the message that resonated in the hearts of everyone present: true strength is not for ruling, but for protecting and loving. In that moment, the jungle had witnessed a profound truth, and the bond between Kobo and the creatures of the forest had been forever sealed.
Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please comment 1. And if you didn't, just hit like. See you in the next videos.